everybody. Welcome to another JP's Chalk Talk session. A little while back, I had a video I posted on my YouTube channel with Madge Obaseki. She's going to correct me when I'm wrong here because I think I just didn't do the name right. And it's an American thing. You'll understand in a moment. So Madge is over the pond in London or the UK. We're going to talk about the state of the online church, or the church over in Great Britain. And Madge is there local, and she's going to talk about what is currently going on. We're going to take a little bit of time here to go through some questions and just have a dialogue and discussion. So before we go to Madge, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Make sure and ring that bell to get notified when I post a video, as well as make sure you comment, right? Those comments are really important. That's how YouTube manages the measurement of these videos within their platform. And I also want to welcome those that are new to this channel, those that are new to maybe what I'm doing here in terms of live streaming and education, talking about the digital church as well as other particular topics, and those that are doing live streaming currently, and you've been doing this now, year 2020, and maybe longer than that. Welcome. Glad to have you. Okay, let's bring Madge in. Hey, Madge, how are you?
Hey.
Hey. Madge just coached me, and I didn't do very well. So
what did I coach you in?
My proper pronunciation of her last name, and for some reason, the crazy American here just cannot.
I was saying to my husband, the other day that, Americans have their own slant on the language. But you know what? I forgive you. You're my brother, and I forgive you. And I'm Madge Obaseki.
Obaseki.
For everybody that's listening.
Thank you, Madge. Madge, just,
okay.
Actually, you guys have a better handle on the English language than we do. So, we kind of, we'll give you guys the credit and everything due. So many disagree with me on that, but I don't. So, because, But
you know what? Conversely, the old saying, America sneezes and the rest of the world catches a cold. So we need to work together.
We do. We need your help. So, Madge, thank you for taking the time to get on here with us and talk to us about kind of what's going on over there in your area with the church. In our last conversation, you interviewed me where we talked about live streaming and some of the basics, and maybe going in a little bit of some detail about of some thoughts to consider, especially for your area in terms of churches that you're working with. But let's take a moment maybe to let you formally introduce yourself, your focus, and outside of your podcast. I know you're doing quite a bit there, so you have the floor for a moment to go ahead and just, why don't we just do that?
Yeah. So I'm Madge Obaseki. I'm actually an ordained minister, and I work with churches as a consultant to help them primarily to look at retention, which has things have changed this year, of course, because we're still in a pandemic. And so I'm helping churches to navigate their way through these issues. And we have been looking for the last few months at online and what it means to the church and how they can continue to evangelize and also disciple. My background is business, so I am a qualified HR professional, but my specialism is training and organizational development, so all links into the church anyway. I have had multiple businesses in my lifetime as well, so I'm a bit of an entrepreneur too. I also am the host of the Healthy Church Growth Show podcast, which is for church leaders and gives 101 style information on a massive range of subjects, everything from fundraising to pastoral care. We're going to talk about crisis in leadership. And of course, I spoke to the lovely John Porterfield about the basics of online streaming. And we're going to continue that today.
Absolutely. So I think this is, so glad to have you back.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Glad to be here.
Oh, thank you. So, Madge, when we talked last time, we talked about live streaming, we talked about the digital church, and just in terms of the generalities of digital and live streaming and some of the specifics. But one of the topics to cover today is obviously all of you there in the UK have been in lockdown a couple times this year at least, and amongst other parts of the world because of the pandemic, and we've seen this state of change. What currently is the state of, and I use that word carefully, the current climate, if you will, of, because of the pandemic, the church there in the UK, as well as the progression from a digital perspective that we're seeing, that convergence, right, of, because we can't meet physically, or maybe we can, but there's limitations to that physical or phygital, as we mentioned last time in our conversation. Maybe just take a moment and just share your thoughts about what you see in your conversations with others.
Well, in March, to be precise, March the 23rd, 2020, which feels like about 10 years ago, because we've done and been through so much. People in the church, leaders in the church, not necessarily the senior leader, but leaders in the church, suddenly, like everywhere else, got thrown into the deep end because they were told that they could not meet, they were not able to, and that actually happened over nearly a 3-month period. Now, at the time that happened, people basically grabbed hold of anything that they knew about. And that was initially Facebook Live, because a lot of the leaders that I personally work with as a consultant are of a kind of age group where Facebook is familiar to them. And then as a secondary, within a few weeks, people had discovered Zoom. Now, I have used Zoom. I used Zoom 4 years ago, before people really knew what it was about in the business space. But then all of a sudden people were using Zoom because they thought that was the next best thing. And thank God for Zoom. And so people have been using Zoom, possibly they got, as I say, swept along by the Zoom room.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And I've been talking to church leaders in the last couple of days and asked them why they use Zoom. And it's because it's easy. And frankly, a lot of them said, because there were private conversations, it's economical for them. And they can jump on and off it. And people that are using it, i.e. the people that are coming into the room, can also use it easily. So those were the 3 basic things. They didn't necessarily have the time at the time to look at what's out there, what tools are out there. What's happened in the last couple of months, though, is because at the beginning people went online and they saw an exponential rise in the amount of people online, they got very excited.
Right.
But in retrospect, and once we come out of this first lockdown, which happened around about, I think it was June, it might have been July, I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
But once we came out of it and we were able to go back to our assemblies, people looked back and thought, but we had all these online visitors, but they haven't translated into turning them into a community. Why is that exactly? And so what people have now understood, or started to understand, is that there might be limitations in the tools that they were using to build community, if that's what they wanted to do. Because what I have noticed is some of the churches are using the tool like Zoom, for instance, and there's some others that I've got listed here, In fact, I've got a tiny report that I've done based on my conversations over the last few days. And some of the churches are actually using conference calling.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are using a webinar platform called GoTo, and only one out of the many people that I've spoken to use StreamYard, which you kindly introduced to me.
Mm-hmm.
They know about that, and OneStream, which I didn't know about until a few days ago.
Mm-hmm.
So most people are going for what everybody else is using and what they know about. And let's face it, they're pastors, they're church leaders, they're ministers. They're not there to study or understand technology. So that's where people were. And when people came out of it, they decided that perhaps the streaming, online streaming, might be something that they could do if they had no choice.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing is to get back to in-person services, and then that online stuff would be somewhere in the background. That
Mm-hmm.
was the general impression I got.
I think that makes sense too. That's kind of an area that I'm gonna separate conversation that I'll be putting in another video that I did a recording with Amazon earlier this year, where we talked about church and media, and I think that you're hitting on a key area of that pain point, if you will. That's the way best way to describe it, is the complexity of technology, right? While there's an acceptance to bring in technology and to integrate some type of solution to solve a specific need, in this case, right, being able to continue the ministry online and to be able to work with others and develop that area, it's kind of at that point, it's kind of a combination of a lot of things in motion, right? You have the technology picking a platform. Do we, the resources to support that effort? The pastor trying to figure out how do we enable this? How do we meet where people are at? How do we get them connected? How do we communicate with them? So there's a lot of wheels in motion, and I think that was one of the things that we saw in the response with those that were looking at some type of solution. Not to say that they don't want to go with something, but that we're always going to pick something that maybe is more advantageous, maybe less complex, or because somebody else uses it, like GoToMeeting or some other type of platform. So you're absolutely right. And so this is something that we're seeing too from a live streaming community. Even the conferences that we do, we tend to pick certain platforms because, well, that's just what everybody's been doing, like Zoom. And so we have the conversation, go like, well, that's great, but we've kind of got, there's a term in the technology industry, we call it eat your own dog food. Not literally, but, and so I worked in an area, and so we kind of have to consume the information that we're providing. We have to be able to use it ourselves. And I think that's key, where you and I talked about that, and you asked me a great question. What would be my availability and servicing to these pastors or people in the area? And that is bringing that expertise versus taking a stack of papers or going online trying to find all this information, and helping accelerate that. So it's interesting that you talk about that. So as they do that, do you see that, or the responses that you're seeing from the individuals you spoke with in these platforms? I would take it that this is kind of one of the challenges we talked about of the technology, but then at the same time, there's the online ministry team. How do you develop that online that team that's going to support those people and engage, like for follow up in terms of decision follow up or discipleship and those type of activities?
Honestly, a lot of the assemblies, the majority of assemblies really have not worked that out. In fact, I spoke to a few of the leaders, and they're doing it themselves between the senior pastor, who's a male, and the wife, and it's the two of them trying to do everything. I I know that across the board, I know there are others that are much more advanced in terms of building a team of people to do that. I happen to have worked with a couple of younger churches who are doing just that. But I just find generally that the senior leaders tend to have most of the response or take on most of that responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure why. Um, it seems to be something that's fairly traditional in the church world. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
senior leaders, the font of all knowledge, and they either expect themselves to take on those roles, or other people expect them to take on those roles. But I'm concerned about people's mental well-being as well.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I've seen, and I have actually suffered from myself, is burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I would say, not that you've asked me, but I would
No, go
say
for it.
that one of the big issues is moving into 2021 is to find people with the gifts to really support the mission, because there are people out there that are willing and able to do just that. Online is very challenging, as we know. You're a professional, and even you will say there are challenges there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not speaking as an online professional. I've just gone into this because I'm a consultant, and I feel like the church has a massive responsibility and
Mm-hmm.
also massive opportunity to go out there and spread the good news by using technology cleverly. But John, I have actually been able to speak to a pastor who wasn't in my immediate network. And the great news is, if people harness the technology
Mm-hmm.
and really plan, and that's another thing I would say, they'll need to do some planning and strategizing towards 2021 to make it all work. But they are doing an amazing job. They're over in the West Midlands, and they're doing an amazing job, all with technology, whether that's discipling. And what I have noticed is they're mixing it with some of the traditional methods, like picking up the phone and phoning people,
Calling somebody.
using yeah, using snail mail for people that perhaps older and don't understand the technology. They're using conference calling. They're recording the sermons and then putting it on a phone line so people can actually hear that. So you
Wow.
can use technology very, very cleverly. It's not always about streaming. It's
Mm-hmm.
not always about playing a video on YouTube or watching it later. It's about the whole thing, the holistic view of what it means to communicate in a very, very different way.
No, I think that I think you kind of hit it right on the nail. Um, that, while technology, we say, is kind of it's a tool, it's not the means to replace the relationship.
No.
And so as I was interviewing somebody also in London the other day in a recording, we were talking about technology, and we use the concept of, if we explain something from, like, in his world, we're transporting information, right? Like a mail carrier or a delivery type service, right? We're taking it from one location and then transporting it to another location to simplify it on the internet, and to be able to do those things regardless of the type of mobile device or TV or some type of technology device that the individual may be using. However, for the church, this is somewhat kind of a compounded issue, because traditionally, you're right, we have reached out in different ways physically in fellowship. Now we got to think about, and I love what you said, planning, because I think that's really the key area that we need to think about with 2021 is the planning approach. And it is, in terms of my background from doing corporate strategic relations and everything, we often use the terms a multi-pronged approach. And what does that really mean? It just means that you're taking an approach to deliver in many different directions. There's not one specific area that's going to be just the specific one that we're going to use. We may be, but we have to really think outside the lines a bit or outside the box to really think about how we take that and deliver to get to where we want to do, for the goal or get over the goal line. In this case, the goal line is for the glory of the Lord and for the church. And as you said, so I think that, what I thought so often when I did live streaming, and a book that my dad, who's a retired pastor, gave to me, was we talked about the 4 areas that we look at in terms of ministry. There is the reach, to be able to reach people where they're at via technology or meeting them in person or calling them on the telephone. And then there's the teaching component, right? And then teaching them. And then there's the training component, the discipleship. And then there's the sending. And as you talked about, the pastor and the senior pastoral staff, or the pastor and his wife, or the individuals involved in terms of pastoral leadership as a whole, is having a team, people come alongside of you in the ministry, whether they're on staff or not, to share that goal and that mission, right, of the ministry, to make an impact in the local area and the communities. And I think there's, as we talk about that, this is the opportunity we have. You hit it right. I think you hit on the next topic we were going to talk about. Is the opportunity is today. The Lord's presenting us with the opportunity. Now the question comes back in my mind: what do we do next, right? And well, what we do next is pray, and we seek the Lord, and we ask for wisdom and discernment as we go and do these activities. But certainly, my role is to support you and others in ministry. And I think that's always why I viewed it. It's like, at the end of the day, I'm another person in the team that's there to help enable to see the vision come alive for the church. So I thank you for sharing that. I think that's key I think that we've all got to work together, and we've got to make some decisions. Things that we may have done yesterday have changed. And so we've got to think about what we do both online as well as locally, and try to, I think that's what an opportunity that the Lord's given us. And in spite of the challenges of the pandemic that I see, is like, Lord, you've given us such an opportunity that we haven't had before. And it's not that it wasn't there. It's just that I think now, okay, Lord's saying he's kind of almost narrowing our focus in with people as those that may not come to the doors of the church, and doing that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because you were talking about that word opportunity, and I feel like we've been presented with a massive opportunity, but it took us by so much surprise that we haven't really been able. There's a word of God that says, if you do not first, it's about building a tower, and about considering the cost. Yes. And that verse is all about strategy and planning. And it's interesting because I've got somebody sent me a report from an organization based in the UK called the All Churches Trust. They're basically an Anglican organization, and I believe they are related to the Church of England. Don't quote me, but I think they are. And they provide funding for social action and charities, as we call them, non-profits over here. And they were talking about the changing face of church communications. And I'm looking down because I've got the top line results here. Now, it's really interesting because they were asked, what form of communication did you use before the coronavirus? And I'm just going to précis this. Face-to-face or in-person, 63%. When it came to social online sources, 0%. Then it says, what form of communication did you use during the coronavirus lockdown. And it says here 22.9% online, so from 0 to 22.9%. And for other forms, altogether it's 37% for online from 0. Yeah.
Wow.
And then it says, what do you expect to be doing in the next year? And this is where I was a bit surprised, because they've now decided that next year is going to be a normal year, according to this. And 45% they feel will be face-to-face. So not as much as before at 63%, but it's still at 45%. And they might have 29% down from 37% online. So what this tells me in a very unscientific way is that people are still feeling like online is a secondary. But I believe, and we mentioned this so many times, this hybrid effect, I think personally is here to stay. And whether we're in the UK as I am, or whether you're over in America, or we're in go over to Korea where we've got lots of Christians there, I think this hybrid is here to stay. So we can marry the physical, and we all know that we want that human relationship, and we understand that. But there are people that will never walk into your local church. They will never, because either they don't live in the same area, or they just don't feel inclined. They may have been hurt by another assembly at some point, and they want to stay away. But in the comfort of their own room, in their own home, they've got access to online, and they can re-engage again. So we need to think about that. And also we need to think about the billions and billions of people that are out there looking for hope, looking for faith, looking for God. As Google has revealed that they were the top searches at the beginning of the pandemic. Those people are looking for something, and we have that brand. We already have it in abundance. But now what we've got to do is to make ourselves available. So that's why I think, John, that hybrid is here to stay. And I'd be really happy with that.
I agree. I think that's a reality in many ways that we need to really just accept. And that's not a negative. It's just the reality of the landscape we're dealing with. There's two things that come to my mind, but the first one is you said that, and stating that, I think that is interesting, is that, we can take a lot of what we have. We have so much depth of ready material for ministry, to minister to others, to help teach, and help for themselves, for the individual, to have that change in their life, of the transitioning of their heart in their walk with the Lord, to be open in those hurts and those things that may have been encountered at a local level, to be restored, and to see themselves restored, what the Lord wants to do in their own lives. And and that's the beauty of the ministry that Jesus came, is to bring hope. And I think in the midst of the situation, people go like, we're in a valley at times, and there's no doubt about that. But, back to Psalms 23, his rod and his staff comfort me. Can people understand what that interpretation of what Jesus is really saying? He brings comfort in the midst of our sorrow, of the challenges, of the overwhelming obstacles that we may be facing, and that there is a hope in the Lord. And at the same time, I think of Pastor J. John in the UK. And so he was in the airport, and he uses the analogy that, that somebody said, "What do you do?" And he says, "Well, I'm in a global enterprise business." And she goes, "Oh, really?" And she goes, "Well, what type of business?" He says, "Well, we're in hospitals, schools, we're in every community, we're in everything." And she goes, That's awesome. What is it called? The church, right? And
I love J. John. Love him.
He's awesome. And we had him a couple of times. Yeah, I do too. I always think we always think of him on here in the state. Don't ask us. We call him Mr. Bean because he looks like Mr. Bean when he comes over us. I don't know if he likes it or not. But anyways, we had him at Harvest.
I suppose it depends on where you are as to whether that's a compliment or not.
Yes, exactly. He took it in stride. He thought, again, you can chalk it off to the crazy Americans and everything else, the way we view things in life. So we're a weird way we filter and look through the lens of life sometimes. But he what he really brought was the reality of the opportunity and what you're speaking towards in the hybrid model. We can still be effective as we look to the Lord, and we absolutely need to look to the Lord. In Second Chronicles, going back to that, if my people will come and humble themselves and pray and seek me, that's the time opportunity we have as a church right now to seek the Lord, to look for his direction, and to say, okay, Lord, we don't know what the days are ahead of us, but you are our front guard and our rear guard. You're the one that's going to bring us through. And so I think there's an opportunity, and for others who may have walked away from the church, those who wouldn't enter the door of the church because they don't have a relationship with the Lord, as you shared in those stats. There's an opportunity here, and there's always an opportunity to bring that message of hope, the good news of the gospel, to a hurting heart, and for somebody to understand that. So thank you for sharing that, Madge. That's I think we need to be we need to be in prayer. We need to be seeking the Lord right now. And more importantly, I agree with you, absolutely. We just need to be working together. We need to set aside some of the differences that we may have and really focus on the Lord as the center and the priority here and the people. And we need to rally the troops together, so to speak, and whether it's online or at a local level. Like you said, with the local church, picking up the telephone, calling somebody, doing whatever's needed. And that at the same time, we refresh and encourage one another in fellowship as we go through that process. And in those days where we're maybe struggling a bit and we're looking like, what's the next step? That those of us are brothers and sisters in the Lord, you and I in the Lord, and others, that we encourage one another in the word, in psalms and hymns, and we look to pray and lift each other up. And so that's what I'm going to be doing for you, is you are there for so many of your peers and others that are there in ministry, to pray and to ask the Lord to bring a wholeness as we go through this together, and to continue the dialogue of communication and doing that. So thank you, Madge, so much for your time.
Thank you.
What a blessing. I really appreciate it.
Bless you. Bless you. One thing I want to say before we say goodbye is I would encourage any church leader that might listen to this, wherever you are, whether it's in the UK, USA, wherever you are, to reach out to experts like John Porterfield and find out, after you've done your prayer, after you've done your strategizing, you might need somebody to help steer you to the right tools which will help you to meet your mission. And that might be different from one local assembly to the other. So reach out to people like John, who can actually help you to work out, rather than wasting the sort of time that I've seen wasted with, somebody texted me today and said, I'm having real problems with Zoom. If you've got any ideas, I'd like to hear them. So there are people out there, they need help. Reach out to John, his team, or anybody that's in the local area that has got the knowledge that can help you to meet the mission.
Amen. Thank you. And just reciprocal, and let me reciprocate for you as well as Madge. I mean, your podcast and what you're doing, and of your time to help and speak with others, just as I speak to others in the techie community, and what we talk about, right? you're doing the same in your ways, and you're taking efforts to work with others and to help broaden the scope of the dialogue, so to speak, to help truly keep those communication channels going right now that we need to have, right? And that dialogue with those in ministry. So, and thank you. And let me just say, if there's anybody in the United Kingdom that needs help, let me know. Even though I'm in the USA, I have contacts there that are people that are local that could probably come help and provide some support as you make some decisions to consider and what you need to do. So everybody, thank you for watching this video. Thank you, Madge, for your time, and we'll be praying. And I just want to encourage everybody to, as we get ready to go in 2021, stay safe, stay well, but also remain hopeful, and remain hopeful that the future, while we may be dealing with challenges, there is a future and there is a hope, and his name is Jesus. And we look to him, and he's the author and the perfecter of our faith, and the one we look to. So God bless everybody. Thank you, and take care. Talk to you soon.